Hi everyone, Tim the Plane Man here, and welcome to Plane Time Red Baron Triplane Edition. This is the continuation of my build of the beautiful Dancing Wings Hobby Fokker DR1 triplane, the S17 770mm version. It's the smaller version of this model. And what I wanted to do before I get too much further was just lay out my plan for how I'm going to do the electronics. This is something that I've picked up moving from rubber powered flight and into building my own RC models. Is, in my opinion, other people maybe don't do it this way, but I find that it's very helpful to plan your electronics before you just build it. Some people just build the plane and then say, okay, how am I going to put the electronics in? I find that it's helpful to plan that ahead. The second thing is that there's some decisions that need to be made. So, in particular, what's not really 100% clear is where to put the battery on this model, and I think I might start with there. There's some other things that flow out from that, and so I'm trying to figure out, get the plan in my head about where the electronics are going to fit, so that I can make some plans and I don't sort of paint myself into a corner on the way through. So this F28 piece here in the model is fundamentally the battery bay. It's the battery board for the mounting of the board. Now, the interesting thing about this is the key question of, do I mount my battery from the top, and there's a nice little hatch here in the bottom where it's possible that the battery could be mounted in the bottom. And I think it boils down to being a choice. You may or may not want to go with what I'm suggesting and choose an alternative. It sort of makes sense to put it in the top. But the other thing is about which battery you're going to use. So when I read the instructions here, that helps you figure this out actually. The instructions here say a 2 or 3S 1300 to 1800 milliamp battery. So I went ahead and I ordered myself an 1800 milliamp. I'm planning to go 3S with this model. I ordered myself an 1800 milliamp hour, the smallest one I could find actually. It's a 20C 3S LiPo, and I thought, that's a nice looking battery. That should be really perfect for this model. But then, and this is the part about planning ahead, then I tried to fit it in, and you can't get it in. There is no way to fit that battery in if this is the battery bay. I mean, and it won't even fit because of the way that this former fits here. It's actually too long to fit into that piece of battery there. The second thing is, let's say I tried to put it in the top, same thing happens. It won't fit. It won't get, well, it could. I mean, it basically sort of sticks against that former there. So I mean, I guess you could technically put it in here, but then you get all your wires are going to be all tangled up against your servos and probably cause sticking or binding. I mean, you could probably figure out a way to get those wires to run without that, but it just seems very untidy to me. So my conclusion is that I'm going to be using a smaller battery, and probably a 1500 milliamp hour battery. So I've ordered a couple of those, but they haven't arrived yet. So what I'm doing is I'm just going with this old 1300 milliamp hour battery. It's approximately the size of the 1500s, and so this gives me I can figure out how this is going to work. So same question, if I assume that battery is going to go in here and far enough forward so that it hits that bulkhead here, because it's going to be almost impossible to push it. I mean, you could, I suppose, push it all the way to the front, but this little this piece here basically gets in the way of it sliding forward. It's going to be quite awkward to put it in and out when you're getting ready to fly, and B, if I stop it here, then it's a long way back, and it's not going to do a good job of helping with the center of gravity. Ideally, I'm going to want my battery all the way forward, because with these older World War I planes like the Sopwith Camel, you know, you really need to have as much weight, as far forward as you possibly can. So my conclusion is that I'm going to want to put the battery underneath, and so part of installing everything before I close it all up is that there is a I don't have it handy, but there's a strap that comes with the model for the battery, and I'm going to assume right now that the intention is that the strap actually will go around this F28 piece from the top, and that when I'm putting the battery in, when it's time to fly, that this battery is going to go kind of in here, and then against there, hard up against the firewall, so that the weight's as far forward as possible, and then that strap will actually go around the battery. So, you know, that tells me the strap actually, when I install it, should be in front of this former here, right, in front of this former, not behind it, because then that'll give us the most bang for the buck in terms of holding that battery in place. So once I have that in mind, that tells me a few other things about where other things need to go, because the battery obviously is going to have to plug into the ESC, and as you notice, I've got my kind of ESC. It's I mean, I have it in the model, but I haven't sort of fixed it yet, but I'm trying to figure this stuff out. So here the ESC is probably going to be mounted, I think, against the side of the fuselage here, one side or the other, possibly this side, I think, but it doesn't really matter, because the engine wire or the motor wires from the ESC will basically come out one of these two slots. I'm actually going to build out the box to put that in place, so I make sure that I get this in the right place. And then what I've done is I've also bought a switch. I did this with the Sopwith Camel. I love how it helps with the kind of the on-off, and it's going to make things much better here as well, because, you know, if you can imagine, you know, you're going to be fiddling around, plug this in, get it in, tie the strap onto the model, then click this is going to be the hatch, click that hatch in place, then turn the model the right way up, and if I use a stabilizer, which I plan to, by that time the stabilizer has completely the wrong idea of which way's up, which way's level. It's really going to be problematic. So although it's going to be a little heavy, I plan to put a switch in, and so what I'll do is between the ESC and the battery, I'll actually put a switch. And so this switch I bought, and one thing you have to be careful of with switches is to make sure that you get a properly rated one. This is a 20 amp ESC, so I've got a 22 amp rated switch, and it's important that, you know, your switch could become the weak point in your electronics if you're not careful. So basically I have to figure out how to route the wires here, but that switch is going to go through between, and so then between the ESC and the battery, I'll probably surface the switch like I'm going to want it on the side of the plane, probably something like, and now that I've plugged it in, it's a little tricky to get it where I need it to be. This is where I need to plan, right? So I can get that out without. Okay, so ideally my switch surfaces maybe, let's see, somewhere like here. There's a nice little side piece on the side of the fuselage that seems perfect for it. Something like that maybe, or potentially there. And it's got, you know, there's actually screws in the side made for screwing that in, so I can probably screw that nicely in there. Put a little extra piece in there just to block it out. So there we go, we'll have a switch on the side of the plane, and then when I click that in, I can plug the battery into the other side of the switch circuit, and then once I've got everything sort of fixed in place, catch the hatch on, turn the plane over, all ready to go, receiver on, flip the switch, and I have power. So that's the second part of my plan around this. I've got another couple of little bits and pieces, which will be these little 2-gram servos, and so these servos are going to be on the top wing, interestingly. So what I'm going to have to do, it is not clear from the diagram, but is install these aileron servos in the top wing. So it's going to be up here somewhere up there, and then need to run those wires probably down the side of the two braces, the two aluminum pieces that will hold up the top wing. So they'll probably run down the inside of that and then come back down and plug into the receiver, which is probably, it's going to be a stabilizer actually, which is and then a receiver. So I'll have a receiver. I'll probably put the receiver on the side of the plane here, ideally on the opposite side to where I put the ESC, so I can minimize the interference. So if I run my ESC and have my ESC over on this side, I'll put my receiver probably on the side of the plane over here, and then what I have here, this is my stabilizer. So this is an Lefay RC SNL Plus, and here it is here. So it's a beautiful little piece of equipment. It's very light, and it will fit pretty much perfectly, and it has to go facing forward, so it'll fit pretty much perfectly here. And if I have my battery underneath, that actually works out quite nicely. It needs to be aligned pretty much identically with the center of gravity, which is supposed to be just in front of that former here, according to the plan. Let me just pull that up. Here's my CG. So the CG is basically, you know, pretty much above the let's see, it's pretty much above the leading edge of that bottom wing. Right down the middle between those two formers here is where the center of gravity is. And is that right? Yes, it is what that says. So yes, and so what that will, whoops, now I've lost it. Okay, so that means that the flight controller, well, it's not really a fully fledged flight controller, but it's more than a simple stabilizer, so somewhere in between. That will basically fit in here. And so what I need to do, which is actually sort of another thing where this plan makes sense. So and that could be, you know, if you're not going to use a stabilizer like I am, then this would be your receiver. Let's go with a more traditional receiver, like you know, what is this? This is a Turnigy, I can't read it, 9X6C, but it has your standard servo rails at the back, and it would be the same thing here. That would fit nicely right there and give you access to the ports for plugging in your servos if that was mounted there. So I'm pretty comfortable with this being, you know, the location for either your receiver, if it's a full receiver, or if it's the location for a flight controller like this one. And then I'm probably going to be using the FSX6B receiver with this flight controller, and so this will be, just get this out here. So this is the receiver itself, and you notice it's much simpler. It doesn't have to have the full set of servo rails, because that's all on the stabilizer. So basically I'll have the FSX6B on the side of the plane somewhere like that possibly, and I'll run the antenna. Let's see, it needs those connectors. Probably run the antenna back somewhere towards the back of the plane, so the antenna's, and most likely along that. So I'll bend it so that I get maximum exposure to the antenna and maximum distance from the ESC, the battery, and all the other electronics. So that sort of makes sense to me. I'll probably mount that on the side of the plane somewhere around here, and then I can just simply plug my S-bus output from the FSX6B into the flight controller, which has an S-bus input. And again, because I'm just okay, let me just find my flight controller here. So my FSX6B has a S-bus, a pretty standard 3-pin S-bus input here. So just one plug in here, one plug in the side of the receiver here, and then I'll take my outputs from my servos for aileron, elevator, and then I'll run. That's interesting. If I'm going to take my servo outputs here, remember I was talking about how I'm going to get the ailerons or the servo wires up to the top? Well, I've got my two struts, one on each side at the front, two at the front and two at the back, and this is the locations where those struts mount into the side of the fuselage. So it looks to me like the wires from the for the servo should probably run on the back, off the back of this one of these two back struts up to the top wing, and so I'm probably going to need an extension. That's okay, I've got that, and I can plug these into the top wing, running the wires down here. So that all seems to make sense. So I think all my bits, nothing's fixed in place, so it seems to be falling apart, but it actually really does make some sense. I have a plan for how this is all going to come together. My receiver, my flight controller, and my ESC, as you can probably see it just down here on the side, maybe further as far to the front as I can get it, so that I can keep it as far away from the receiver and likely the flight controller as I can, and I'll have lots of space, and so they're all going to fall out now while I turn it over. But I'll have lots of space under here, because this is the part where I am going to have a few wires running around to deal with my switch, my ESC, and my battery, and that will actually work out quite nicely because the battery will fit in cleanly right here, get strapped in, and then I will have my switch and my other wires basically, and I'll tie them up in quite nice and cleanly underneath here, basically underneath the wing. The good news is, and this I really do like this approach, the wing screws on, so although it won't be easy to access, it won't be I have to disassemble the model, because once I mount all of my electronics in here, and before I put my wing in, I'll get all of those wires right, and they will all be lined up and clipped and tied in nice and tight here. Then I'll screw my wing on. But if I do need to get at the electronics for whatever reason, then the bottom wing will unscrew, and I should be able to access those if I need to. So it's sort of like a win-win. Access to electronics is always one of the key things that I plan ahead for, that I've learned through experience building some of these things. If you assume your electronics are never going to burn out, never going to break, then you're probably going to end up doing some major surgery on your plane, because they will. It's pretty much the conclusion that I've come to, which is, you know, just one of the fun things about this whole thing. So there's my plan, and that is what I'm going to do next, which is sort of two pieces. And I won't. Look, I'm going to record it in time lapse. I do have time lapse video for all of this. Maybe let me know in the comments if you are interested in seeing it, because right now it's kind of boring, just, you know, laying out some pieces and sticking them all together. It's not going to give me a huge boost in terms of having a very popular video, but I don't know, you may find it helpful. So I'll record the time lapse as I build out the rest of the fuselage and start to look at putting my electronic pieces in, because I really do have to put these in next. So because otherwise, once everything else gets sort of flushed out, then I get end up getting less and less access into the model. So it's quite important to start to do this now, and that's what I'll do. So thanks for watching. If you like the video, please like, please subscribe to the channel. There'll be more about this model in particular, and hopefully sometime soon, if the weather's nice, I'll be doing a maiden flight of the Sopwith Camel that you can see behind me. Potentially some other interesting things, because I'm also doing some stuff with Triplane, and some of you may be interested in that. So thanks for watching, and Tim the Plane Man, over and out.